The question is, are science and faith complementary? They are in some sense, just because science limits itself to what it can study. And so I would say they're complementary in the sense that science can only study a limited amount of things. But I don't like the idea of having these in two separate categories. I like to think of a big circle, which is the way my faith influences all of my life. And that in that circle are smaller circles like science, which is one aspect of what I do. And so I don't like to see those things as separate. I like to think that my faith informs my science. And so my faith informs my science in several ways. It has to do with how I practice science. So it has to do with the ethics of how I practice science, honesty, sharing my results, how I treat my colleagues, how I treat my students. But it also has to do, I think, more deeply in the following sense, that I think the Bible teaches us that we're fallen creatures. We're easily susceptible to fooling ourselves, to deceiving. And so a lot about the scientific methods, I think, is an elaborate way of helping us not fool ourselves. In fact, a lot of times my students, when they first start the PhD with me, they want to please me. So they kind of try to guess what the results are that I want them to get from their calculations. And they sometimes can manufacture these results by may perhaps be not quite sure about a few intermediate steps. And they think that makes me happy, but it doesn't make me happy, because I want them to be absolutely rigorous on every single step. Because I say the first rule is that you must not fool yourself, because you are the easiest person to fool. This is a quote from Richard Feynman. And I think the Christian story, which tells us that we're fallen, and therefore we're susceptible to self-deception, is a really helpful way of thinking about how I do science. And so there's a sense in which the way we publish, and this is refereed and checked by other people, we do that because we don't want to fool ourselves, we don't want to fool other people, we want things to be honest. And of course, there are lots of kind of pre-theoretical ideas that I now assume are true. Ideas like uniformity, or rationality, or intelligibility, that we assume are true, but are not obvious that they're true. We're just brought up without them. And I think they have deeply Christian roots. So I think, for example, the fact that the world is logical is because there's a logos behind it. The fact that the world is intelligible is because there's an intelligence behind it. And I think those are really important fundamental presuppositions that I take to my scientific practice that have theological roots. And even though my colleagues may assume that that's true because that's how they were brought up, it's not obvious that those things are true. And so that's another way in which my faith informs my science.